Dr. David Bergen, and he's just going to be talking to us about personal impact. So I'll let him go ahead and get started. If you guys can, please mute your microphones and go ahead and turn on your camera.
Sydney, I could kind of hear you, not hear you. Are we ready to start or not get started?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. How are you? I know it's sort of crazy to do this online, and I'm really excited to talk to you about impact and presentation skills. I'm so excited that there's so many people here on this, I would say beautiful, but relatively hot Friday afternoon. And I am in my office in Norcross, and the air conditioning has been broken all week. And so if I look shiny, it's just because it's hot in my office. And so, but I'm hoping you're doing well, and I'm just real excited. I'm very impressed. Be invited to come to speak with all of you. I've learned a lot about Alpha Lambda Delta, and you all are great students. I'm like really, really impressed. And so I'm real excited to speak with you. What I want to do is set a couple quick ground rules. You can interrupt me anytime. I'll keep the chat open, and Sydney, just interrupt me if there's some point or something that people want to ask. I do have two questions I'm going to ask you because we're talking about, again, presentation. And then I want to be pretty casual about it. And so I just really appreciate that. Now, Sydney, do I have permission to share my screen? Yes, I guess so. Maybe you're muted. Okay. Let me see if that. Can you see my screen now, everybody? Yes? Okay. What I want to do, whoops, I don't want that on there. No, I don't want that. I don't think this is what I want. Hold on one second. I don't know why this is here. I don't want that on. I want to play from current side. Okay. I think this is looking like I want it to look. Oh, well, hold on one second. There we go. All right, so what I want to do, and Sydney, I am not able to see the chat. Anyways, we'll work it out. What I really want to talk about is how to deliver an amazing presentation and the idea of presence and how you do that. And I really want it to be a little different than what we typically talk about in terms of that process. So here is hold on, let me just move this real quick. So here's what I want us to talk about. I want to talk about presentation fears and challenges, and I really want to focus a little bit on anxiety and how we can transform that. I also want to look at from two meetings, not educating your audience as in here's what I have to talk about, but educating them in terms of who you are and how you're going to tell them how they're going to respond to you. Some presentation advice and, of course, academic presentations. All of you are good students or you would not be involved in this organization. And so I want to talk a little bit about the academic part of that process. Okay. Why is it not working? Okay. Now, in the chat, which I'm going to try to get back to, if you can, tell me what your biggest presentation fear is. Now, I have up here, what is your biggest presentation challenge? But I also want to hear I really want to hear what your biggest presentation fear is. So if people could type in some points, that would be great. And let me see how I actually see those. Yikes. So I want to hear biggest presentation fear. Forgetting my script, right? Not being well spoken, that's great. Leaving the audience confused. Excellent. Let's get a few more. Having a non-interactive audience. Don't you love making a presentation like this virtually when everybody's muted? It's just less than ideal. I would love for us to be in person, and I know that's coming here. Talking to a large group, eloquence, losing my train of thought, forgetting my main points, forgetting something, saying wrong things, not sounding knowledgeable. Yes. I would imagine that most of you take classes that require one or more presentations. And as you are move up in terms of heading closer and closer to graduation, that is going to increase. Okay, so now let me go back to great points. Thank you, everybody who responded. I really appreciate that. I know that's tough. Okay, so here's what I want us to talk about. Okay, as we figure this out, here's the whole thing about anxiety. For most people, and a lot of you have heard this before, the number one fear is speaking. And there's a lot of, anthropological theories about standing out and all of that. And so what I really want to do is let me just talk about anxiety. And this is a very common issue, and it comes out of our fear, it comes out of a challenge, and all of those points that you shared make us feel anxious. And think about anxiety for a second. And I know some of you are, probably psychology majors. But the point is, when we think of anxiety, we think of being hypervigilant. We think about being very much ready for something to happen. Maybe some of you have studied the flight or fright response. And so the idea is that it's a physiological response that helps us. What happens is when we're presenting, tends not to be very productive. And it causes us to focus on things other than the presenter. And that's what I want us to talk about for a few minutes. So let's do this. And some of you have your cameras on, some of you don't, it's fine. But I want you to think about this. If you're willing to practice it, if you're where people can see you, you don't have to do it. But this is a very common way of managing anxiety. And think of it this way. Anxiety comes out of your brain. So it's either a fear, it's something that we feel like is going to happen, it's our perception of something that is happening. And so the brain controls our body. That's why anxiety feels so bad. But the other point is the body controls the brain. So we can physiologically calm our brain down, which then leads to greater physiological relaxation. And I'll bring this back full circle a little later. This is a very common exercise. For some of you, I am sure is not new, but I want you to think of the metaphor of eating soup. Okay, you're eating soup. And so in breathing in, you are smelling the soup, and in breathing out, you are cooling the soup off. And so when we are trying to manage our anxiety, whether we're in some social situation, whether we're making a presentation, whether we're interacting with someone that is making us anxious, this is a very common and very effective way to do it. And what happens is it allows us to get back into control, because anxiety brings us out of control, and what we want to do is come into control. And so I want you to think about breathing in to 4, holding it for 4, and then breathing out. Can we try it if it's not too strange where you are? And think about calming yourself down in terms of a presentation. So think about breathing in through your nose, so smelling the soup, 1, 2, 3, 4. Holding it, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then exhaling through your mouth. And people who struggle with anxiety, this is research proves is a very effective way of managing that anxiety. And so I just wanted to start with that as a point of trying to overcome, because there's so many fears, there's so many challenges, and I am absolutely and fundamentally convinced everybody can be a fantastic presenter, and it's our way of getting to success. The more successful you are, the more presentations you're going to make. Okay, so when we think about a presentation, here's what we can talk about. We can think about key questions. So who will be in your audience? What is the main purpose of your presentation? And what is the main message you want them to take away? So that focuses what we do. So we're actually going to talk about some presentation skills. What I really want to do is talk about you. I really want to talk about your mindset. I really want to talk about your confidence. And so that is my main message. And I know you do a series of these talks. Of course, I don't also want this to be like boring. I don't want it to be horrible. It's Friday afternoon. I don't know who schedules these. And so they're probably working around class schedules and labs and everything. So this is probably the realistic time when people are able to do this. But when we know what the intent is, when we know what our purpose is, it calms us down. It allows us to be more effective in any interaction, in any conversation, in any class activity, and certainly in presentations. Okay, so let's talk about the presentation journey. So tell your audience your destination. So we went over a little bit about what we're going to talk about, and outline the roadmap. So you always want to have some sort of agenda, some sort of schedule, and provide a time frame. And so maybe we'll talk today for, it's 4:11, maybe till 4:30 or whatever. We don't have to lengthen it, extend it too much unless there's some discussion afterwards, which I will certainly offer. And then tell them when to ask questions. So I already said you could make comments in the chat box, which Sydney's going to help me manage. And of course, you can interrupt me anytime for where there are any questions. And I'll certainly hang out later if people have any questions post presentation. And if you don't want to, then you can go, of course. When you structure it, then someone won't ask a question or do something that offends you or makes you nervous. And if questions are really tough, for whatever you say, put them at the end, because then it doesn't throw you off in terms of your schedule or your tempo. Now, this is really key. This is the heart of what I want to talk about. And let me move this box. But what happens is this. I want to talk very intentionally about this idea of educating your audience. I'm not talking about your content and what your audience is going to get from it. That's easy. Everybody knows that. I'm telling you this. You get to set the stage. When you're making a presentation, unless those people are your friends or whoever's in the audience, a lot of times they don't know what to expect. When we think about Nido Qubein, now we know he's a really great speaker. And so for people who have never seen him before but know his reputation, they're anticipating him being a great speaker. And so he is, and he lives up to or exceeds their expectations. When you're in a class, whether you're a professor, they may have never known you before. And so I want to talk about a couple of things here that really set the parameter, and there's lots of reach in terms of where this can go other places. One, appearance. Now, I would probably have a jacket on if the air conditioning was working, and I've got a jacket over there, but I would be sweating to death. And so, but I've got like a regular shirt on. The idea is, I believe that when we are dressed for success, I hate to use that phrase because it's so ridiculous, but the idea is that how you dress sets how you feel. It stages your mindset. And so I want you to think about that. And so when we are dressed down and hanging out with friends, great. When we're in our pajamas or whatever you wear around your room or suite or house, great. When you're making a presentation, typically people are more professionally dressed up. And the idea is that that is setting the stage for how people are interpreting you, how you're setting the impression on them. The other issue that goes with that are your nonverbals, not your verbals, but your nonverbals, how you're speaking, how you're moving. I'm actually being more dramatic now just because everybody's staring at their laptops. And so in person, I'd be walking around, I would be trying to engage with people, I would be doing eye contact. And the idea is that nonverbals set the stage. If you are smaller, you're communicating less self-esteem, less certainty. And what happens is that people feel like, ooh, they're insecure. They don't have confidence. When we're bigger, when we're more dramatic, when we engage people, it exudes confidence. And so I want you to always strive to exude confidence. So some of you have me in class, some of you have had me in class. And so as a professor, I really want to set the stage. We were laughing in I had two research methods classes this morning. Students were doing presentations. And we were laughing about just how I was saying good morning to everybody and calling people by their name. Of course, it's the end of the semester. Your professors know all your names. And the idea is that it is to set the stage for my class, for David Bergen time. And I think that that is a really important thing to do when we're in a presentation, to welcome, to introduce yourself, and to take mastery of that space. You looking good and your nonverbals, I think, is really important. Here is another key. This is fundamental. If you take away anything, this is what I want you to take away with. When we're feeling anxious, when we're feeling nervous, you focus on yourself. Of course, you're surviving. You're trying to hope I don't mess up. I don't forget my points and all the wonderful things that y'all said. Focus on the audience. Our anxiety goes down. Our fears subside. We can move through them, not away from them, but through them when we focus on the audience. What do they need? What do they want? Where are they? That's the way that we achieve success. And so when you think of someone like, again, I'll use Nito as an example because he's such a master speaker and internationally known, is because he focuses on his audience. And if you're able to see him like at an open house, like whatever, if you can remember in the past, with your parents and then just with students, maybe one day you'll see him at graduation, completely different. He has a very different style because he's focusing on the audience. He's not focused on himself. So for self-regulation and self-focused, that makes us less effective as speakers. If we're focused on the group, then it makes us more effective. And so always focus on the audience, and hence some of the things I said before. Lead them where you want them to go. Follow them. I mean, have them follow you. The idea is you're the leader. You're going to take them on a journey, and the group wants to follow. And so the idea is that, what am I learning? What are we doing? What are we talking about? What are some takeaways? Most things you're not going to remember. You are really great students. You'll go to a class and be like, what just happened? Like, I don't know. And so you review later, you study later, whatever. And the idea is take them with you. That's why you have to have a plan. Um, Listen, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. You got to forgive yourself. Even in life, some of you have studied self-talk before. It's what we say to ourselves, but typically not literally, but like in our heads. People are always most cruel to themselves. And what happens is the messages that we give ourselves are typically much worse than what other people say. The audience is almost always on your side. They're not against you. Maybe in a political settings or other things, there's some agendas, but not in class presentations, there's typically not. And so if you make a mistake, move on. People really are not attending to that. They're kind, they're empathetic, they understand, oh, I made a mistake too, or I've done this. Um, and the idea is that it really does, when you linger on it, it hurts you and it really hurts your presentation. And most people really, really don't care. It really doesn't matter. And technology issues are forgivable, of course. If you forget what we want to say, had a really good point, I'll come back to it. It just is the way it goes. There may be no other option. And the other thing is have fun and add humor. I think that it is great to involve the group. It's hard virtually because I'm not getting a lot of feedback, but it is really important to be able to have fun or add some things to a presentation. And you can do it and you can connect with the audience. I am a very big believer in authenticity and to being real in front of the group. And so as I look at my little image in the corner, I'm like getting shinier because it's getting hotter and hotter. One, because I'm presenting, and two, because the air conditioning's broken. And so it's just like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Okay. Click this back. Now let's go back to the chat box. And what I want to do is, I want to hear, what do you do really well? So if you all are willing to add some points, what do you do really well when you're presenting to others? I don't want to focus on just like, oh, I'm going to forget bad things, but what do you do really well? If you could add some of those to the chat box, that would be great. When presenting, what do you already do well? That's great. Engaging my audience, using humor, not relying on the slides. That's great. Knowing the content. Eye contact is so important. Speaking clearly, loud enough. We're going to talk about that. It's awesome. Projecting your voice. It's interesting now talking to my laptop. I have no idea if I'm loud, soft, emphasizing the main point. Excellent. Excellent. And I'm sure it's true. We have a lot of people who aren't responding, but I think that there's probably a lot of you that share that. Let me just say this as a thing, and as I get back to the presentation. It's never a good idea for us to focus on the negatives. Always focus on the positive. I know it sounds so cliche, but go in with your strengths and try to overcome what are some of the challenges. If we go in all about, I'm anxious, I'm anxious, I'm anxious, I'm anxious, I'm anxious, I'm anxious, then you're just going to be one big anxious mess. And you're going to fall apart, and you should. I mean, that's great. You're congruent, you're authentic, you're a real person. But if we go in and say, like, I'm pretty good at this, and this is a skill I can go back on, and I'm good at eye contact, I have good voice, and I have vocal projection. There's nothing like going to a great presentation, you can't hear anything. But maybe this is kind of tough for me, and so I'm going to work on that, or I'm going to try to really address that today. But maybe if eye contact is not so much of a problem for me. Maybe I don't have to focus on that because I know I'm going to do that anyway. I'm real big on eye contact in my classes because it engages my students. I don't want them to be I don't want them to be bored. Okay, so let me go back to my screen and see if it'll let me do it. Yes. Great. So thank you for everyone's feedback. Let's see if this will work. Okay, so let me give you some presentation, just general advice. One of the things always is always plan. You always want to plan your presentation topics and timing. How much time do you have? What is the agenda? I was given up to an hour. Nobody wants to listen to me talk for an hour. That's just the reality. There's no hurt feelings. And so maybe if someone else does a more structured presentation, great. But an hour is actually a really long time, given the time and all of that. Practice. I've made many presentations on presentations. I still went over this yesterday, and I've already been over it twice today. I have 4,000 things I want to say, and I am limited on the time. So I could pick any line of this or any of the other ones, talk for an hour on that. Any of you who've had me in class know I could literally talk forever. And so people don't want that, of course, I realize that. I say videotape your presentation. Have a friend, take your phone, let them hold your phone, whatever, record it, time it. Give yourself feedback. Feedback is really, really the key in terms of that. Like we talked about, the confident body language, the nonverbals, and really think about where's your enthusiasm? As a professor, I'm a department chair. When I see a student's presentation, they're like, yeah, so I did like 4 research questions and I've got like a couple sources for each and whatever. I guess do y'all really want to hear this? And oh, I messed up. If there's no enthusiasm, guess what? There's no energy. Remember, educate your audience. If you have energy, they have energy. If you're involved, they're involved. If you're enthusiastic, they're enthusiastic. And so the idea is really you think, what am I educating them on how I want them to interpret me? Particularly if they're evaluating you or if there's some other benefit for you, then that's great. A couple things that are obvious, of course, get there early, get set up. I try to get to class early. It's hard for me. Sometimes I have classes right in a row in different buildings, but I want to be ready and set up so when students come in, I can greet them and talk to them. And I'm not running over by the computer and panic trying to get everything ready before the time of class. Some people need to have water. I'm not a big water thing. I do have my High Point cup with water in it, but that's just because it's sitting on my desk in terms of that. And tell a story. Tell a story. It's really funny when I think about my own presentation. I went to Wake Forest for my undergraduate, and a long time ago, when I was in school, we didn't make a lot of presentations. Your whole life is like group projects, presentations, and lectures. Well, we would go to class and the professor would talk for an hour or 2 hours, however long class was, and then we would leave. And a lot of times we wouldn't even talk to the professor. One of the things that I've made a commitment to for my many years as a professor is to be available and talk with students. They text me, they talk. I really want to be available whenever they need me because that was the exact opposite of how it was when I was in school. So I went through all of college. Think about this. I went to Wake Forest for my undergraduate master's and then went somewhere else for my PhD. I only made one class presentation the whole time. Psychology major, made one class presentation. And I don't know what happened. I probably blacked out for most of it. The idea is that when I was in graduate school, they forced me to teach a class. And I said, I'm not teaching a class. I don't want to be in front of anybody. I'm not going to do it. And my advisor said, I've already signed you up. You're teaching class. So the very first day of class, I'm teaching, and it's actually going pretty well. And I guess that was my second year of graduate school. And so I had made other class presentations by then. Well, about 10 minutes into the class, he comes in. And so I thought it was just going to be me. I literally sat there for 2 minutes and did not say anything. I was so like anxious, nervous, and he was like gesturing to me like, keep going, keep going. And I got myself together and was able to do it. And I was just like so horrified and everything. It wasn't until I started working at High Point and I taught a class that I fell in love with teaching. I never thought I'd be a professor and I never thought that I would teach. And I love every second of it. And I know it sounds really strange, but for me, and I now love presentations and I have literally like no anxiety. Sometimes I can't wait to get to class, see my students, see where they're going. And for me, I love the journey of the semester. So the beginning of the semester, middle of the semester, and by the time it's over, I'm like, this is kind of getting boring. I want to start another class, another group of students, another semester. It's perfect. I don't want to teach the same group for 3 years. That'd be horrible. But I'm so used to it. And so for me, in terms of my development as a presenter, as a professional, in terms of how I imagine myself, a lot of times I'm setting the stage for my class as I walk to class. What do I want to achieve today? I know the content, so I'm not worried about that, and I have all my materials. But I'm thinking, what are we going to do today? What do I want? What do I want to, what vibe do I want to give? What are we going to talk about? I teach I teach 4 classes now, but 3 of the classes are senior research methods classes, and they're all graduating. So there's lots of talk about graduation, graduate school, jobs, opportunities. Some are doing internships. And so that's kind of the vibe of that class. And but I wouldn't do that in other classes. So I kind of set the stage again. Who's my audience? What do I want to do? Have visual aids, handouts. Of course, you certainly know how to make presentations in Google Slides or Prezi or PowerPoint, whatever. And then prepare points for discussion. I've already asked you 2 questions. It's hard in this format because there's so many. I did a series of webinars for the state, and sometimes there were many, many people, and so I couldn't ask questions. There was just too many. In fact, I had a couple of people managing it because it was just so impersonal, and I was sitting right where I am now in my office with a laptop. If you want to manage, if you're afraid of the questions, manage the points of discussion. And so you ask questions, and then maybe you can answer them, you can have them answer them. Remember, you're educating your audience, you're telling them how it's going to work. And now in some of your academic classes, the professor may tell you, and so manage that within the process. A lot of you said this, that you're great at this. Project your voice, especially now we have the stupid masks on. Hopefully the masks are going away. One of the things I've said is I want to have a huge mask bonfire on this campus. I'm going to text Nito about it because I am so ready to get out of masks because they muffle your voice. They hide your face. It's antithetical to what we're trying to do. And so always make sure that people can hear you. The best presentation unheard is a terrible presentation. And so that's a pretty easy point of recommendation. Okay, let's talk for a few minutes about academic presentations. Many of you are going to be doing research. A lot of you are headed to graduate school. I know you're very successful students, or you wouldn't be in the Honor Society. And so always think about this. What's your argument? What's the evidence? There's always going to be evidence. Someone comes and is trying to sell something. Someone's trying to convince something. We're no matter what you're trying to convince someone of or persuade them of. Typically, presentations have some outcome. What is the evidence of that is really, really important. Anything that you include in terms of quotes, ideas, data, images, whatever you want to cite. This is an informational, casual conversation, but if it was more formal, I would have full references and documentation in terms of that. Always have references as your last slide. Here's the thing, people don't want to see that, so you typically don't have to show that. But if someone wants a copy of your presentation, you include your contact information on it and you include all the references. And so people may come, I'll go to a conference, present a talk. I don't really show, I have citations in my slides, but I don't show the references because people don't really want to see it. But if someone wants a copy of my presentation, I send it and then all the references are there. Saves you time in terms of that. With the handouts, references, be critical in selecting your materials. Again, you're being judicious and faculty will guide you based on your discipline and field and everything, what is appropriate and what's juried or scholarly is very, very important. The more educated your audience, the more specific you have to be because they may have read all your sources in terms of that. One of the things to think about is, do you have different viewpoints? I don't think I'm presenting anything real controversial, but let's say, something like climate change, environmental sustainability, and other things. While I feel very strongly for that, not everybody agrees with that. And so maybe you have to make an argument for economic viability or employment impact. And so you really want to avoid bias by saying, what does the research say? What are the facts is real important in terms of academic presentations. And I will tell you, all faculty speak in facts because we've all had to do independent research and make things happen. And of course, use language that's specific to your field, to your discipline, and your faculty certainly will guide you on that. And you always want to invite questions at the end. Like I said, here I'll invite questions. We can do those chat, or if people want to stay on, and we can do those verbally. People may not be interested, fine. Again, not a problem in terms of that. So let's think about this. I want to, as we kind of wrap up, I want you to think about some reflection points in terms of your ability to shape and deliver presence. We can talk about image. We can talk about presentation branding. And so always think about planning and preparation. The more prepared you are, doesn't matter where it is, presentations or not, the more confident you're going to be. Lack of preparation is typically a primary source for anxiety, for fear, for not doing well, for tripping. As a professor, I can spot an unprepared student a mile away, and I can do it. Think about confidence and mindset. What is your mindset? Where is your energy around it? Is it a required assignment and you're dreading it? Okay, well, that's okay. Admit that. Admit that and say, okay, how is that impacting me? I know you all have learned much about growth mindset or a fixed mindset. If you think, okay, I'm forced to do this, I don't have a choice, but what can I do to make this fun? What can I do to make this entertaining for me or for the group? How can I engage them in some way? If I don't have any choice, then what's the way I can make it the best possible? Certainly educating your audience. Realize the elements within your control. Realize the elements within your control. And the idea is that helps shape the pace, the tempo, the energy, the impact of your presentation. And that is just brilliant. And what happens is that the best presenters think about how they are educating their audience. Some people see it as manipulation. It is very manipulative. Communication is manipulative. And so then you think about, okay, let's do it so they can hear it, so they can be involved in it, so they can participate. And so that's to the benefit. Of course, you recognize and understand. I could give everybody email something to you and say, list 10 great presentation skills. The presentation skills are not unknown. Doing them is what the challenge is. And so that's what I want you to think about. How do I demonstrate stellar presentation skills? It's not that you don't know what they are. It's just that you don't do them. And how do you do that? We get that through feedback, through the recording, and other kinds of things. Let go of mistakes. Listen, for this, for a million other things in your life, be nice to yourself. Be kind to yourself. People are so hard on themselves. And there is, I believe in, stress and pressure, and helps us perform better and everything. That's to run fast, you have to run fast. You have to work your body. You have to strengthen your body. To have mastery of things, you have to exercise your mind. I get that. It doesn't come easy. But sometimes we trip. Sometimes we fall. And I really encourage you to get up and say, hopefully next time I won't trip, Get feedback is really important. Get feedback. What did I do well? What didn't I do well? What did you like? What didn't you like? Every presentation in my classes today and other days, I'm writing a full sheet of feedback. Here's what I liked. Here's what I didn't like. And the idea really of giving people feedback so they have strategies for improvement in the future. Get that for yourself too. And then, of course, celebrate your success. What can you do that is going to be rewarding and to celebrate your hard work, because you deserve that. Questions. And so let me unshare. Comments, questions. I promised, it's 4:34, so I'm a little bit late. What do you think? Reflections, questions, comments? Yes, no? We don't have to force it.
Oh, I have a question.
Yep.
It might be kind of silly, but we talk about this a lot in the science department, is that we shouldn't make like super pretty presentations. Just visually, what would you suggest kind of we do to gauge how like pretty or visually appealing our presentation should be?
That is a fantastic question. I would never give the presentation you saw at an academic conference. Not one of those slides. Yeah, I would not even consider it. So you're a student group, it's Friday afternoon, you're like, I've had a long week. Who is this bozo? What are we doing? How many of these do you have to go to? I don't know any of those answers. And so it's better for me to go a little bit over than under. If I just had text on white, you'd be like, you have got to be kidding me. I've already paid $100,000 to sit through this for 40 hours this week. Why am I doing this Friday at 4 o'clock? So I went a little bit over. In academic presentations, typically you would not. You would have graphs and figures and other things, but you would be much more professional. There'd be citation at the bottom. And what I would do, and this is a great, to expand that, get somebody's feedback. Make your presentation, have one of your professors look at it. If your professor of that class is willing to give you feedback, fantastic. If she or he is a jerk and won't do it, get somebody else to do it. Say, will you look at this really quick and just be like, give me some feedback. Let me know what you think. Because what you're saying is you're judging how the audience is going to respond. And I think that's exactly how you need to be thinking. But what do I want to do in terms of that? I think it's dependent on the audience, the context, and what you're talking about. And so sometimes you have to have visuals or it doesn't make any sense. Other times visuals are distracting. And what we have to do is we probably have to temper the color, maybe the size. I think I really like transparent kind of background that's sort of almost opaque. And then your information, so you have some design, so it's not just like black text on a pure white background. It's like some kind of torture. But I think that's a great question, and it really depends on variables within the situation itself. You'd never want to have it look comical, because then, especially for something like academic, because then you are your faculty members, many of which are would probably have a preference for plainer, could potentially take off points for that because you're seen as less serious. Does that make sense? This context is different than. That's great, and I'll actually add that. Maybe give some examples. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I really appreciate that. Other questions? I like seeing the happy birthdays in the background in some of your things. I think that's kind of fun. I'm assuming everybody here has air conditioning but me. So it's hot where I am.
I have a question. My name is Miranda, just for reference.
Okay.
When being enthusiastic during a presentation, is there a tone of voice that you take that's different between subjects? So a more casual presentation versus a more professional presentation?
Listen, when we think about intonation, when we think of pace, when we think of some of the very specific elements in terms of presentation, again, another excellent question. There is a judgment call to make in that. Sometimes we might slow down if we want to make a point that we want everybody to get. Maybe if we're talking about foundational information that we think most of the audience has, but maybe not everybody, we might go quicker. Does that make sense? Some topics are pretty sensitive, and so we have to be careful. We have to be very deliberate in terms of what we're saying and how we're saying it, where other things we might be more casual. I am kind of strange, if I just go personal for a second, I'm kind of strange as a male. I am overly dramatic. And so it helps me as a professor because you don't want to have someone just like slide 14, slide 15, you're just like deaf. You're like shopping for something online during class and you're acting like you're taking notes. All of you are really good at faking attention. I do it all the time. And the idea is that when we think about educating the audience and controlling vocal qualities and pace and other elements, we have to be very, very specific. So it goes almost back to the previous question, is that the more serious, the more academic. It's not that you can't have fun. I don't want everybody to think like academics are not fun. And sometimes faculty kind of portray that. I've been to conferences with people who've written like 30 books and 200 articles, and they're hilarious. They are hilarious. But there's always a serious element of it. Their methodology is serious. Their research is serious. It's peer reviewed. They have a lot of credibility. And because of that, they can be funny. Does that make sense? And so I've been a professor here for decades. And so I feel very confident in the classroom. And so I'm going for engagement. I'm going for participation. I want my students to be with me. And so I can go faster if they're with me. I do PowerPoints, I post them online, I give them printed copies, trying to be responsive to people who have accommodations. So I'm doing all kinds of things that are facilitating that conversation. But again, I would get feedback. I would have someone kind of give you advice on that specific to the context. In terms of that, you've probably all been to things with student life that are kind of like foolish and dramatic. Then you've been something maybe academic that's super dry. That's the range. That's the range. And you have to think about like where the audience is, their, willingness to accept and participate with what you're talking about. I've done sexual harassment talks with freshman men. It's their minds go somewhere very different. I mean, we had men with men, women with women, so I wasn't with women. And I had to be very careful about what I said. And then I didn't want them to be careful with what they said, but of course I had to represent, the High Point University policy, and I was very careful. And I got real graphic sometimes because sometimes like, what are we talking about? And but I was very intentional. I was very deliberate. And I got real serious saying we can make this funny, but there is a side of it that is devastating to an individual. And so I was able to temper. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you for asking it. Listen, I don't know what you do after this. I don't know if this is the end or do you have, I don't know what happens, but I'm willing just to stay on if anybody has any other questions or anyway. Again, my name is David Bergen, and it's D Bergen, D-B-E-R-G-E-N. And I am just, I love working at High Point. I want you to know that. And I really enjoy supporting students. And I think this is a real special place. And your academic excellence, I want to tell you, is impressive. And I want you to be proud of that. I know there's a lot of work. Of course, you're all like, you have a whole lot of horsepower up here, which is fantastic. But, great things are ahead. And I really, any way I can be of support, please let me know because, and Sydney also can give you my contact information. But it's real exciting, and to be part of this honor society and for it to be early in your academic career is really stunning. So I celebrate that. So I don't know what happens, but I'm gonna always kind of hang out here, and then if anybody wants to chat afterwards, I'll stay on.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Bergen. If anybody wants his contact information, like he said, you can email ALD email and we can get that to you. You can probably also just look it up, Dr. Bergen HPU, and I'm sure it'll pop up somewhere. I'll go ahead and share the attendance link and the QR code so you guys can fill that out to get credit for coming today. But yeah, just stay on if you have any questions.
Great. Thanks, Sydney.
I had a quick question about the attendance. My laptop wasn't working, so I'm on my phone. So how should I email someone?
I sent the link in the chat as well. Okay, well, hopefully everyone has gotten the attendance link. But thank you again, Dr. Bergen. That was awesome. I know that was it was really informative, and I'm sure our members found it really helpful. So thank you again. I'll go ahead and end the meeting here.
Great. Thanks, Sydney. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.